everybody, and welcome to the show. I'm James, that's Katie, and of course, that makes this episode 56 of the PlayStation podcast known as Circles and Squares. We're here again, Kate. It's part of the PlayStation, the Circles and Squares podcast experience.
As it's now officially known as.
It's now official, and we have to call it that every time. Look, I got something to tell you about before we start the show, though. I just did something very cool and unique for the first ever time, and that was I played one of the Fortnite season-ending events, those live events that happen like at specific times, and it was a blast. I really enjoyed it. Like, I think, as I've told you a few times just on the show, we've been playing quite a bit this season, with the zero build mode and everything in Fortnite, and this season event was really cool. It was like getting online at a certain time, and it ended up being this kind of thing where we were piloting a mech, like in Power Rangers, like everyone's in the mech and you're going through and fighting some guys, and it was just a really cool thing to be a part of.
Like, did you get to be the arm? Or like
sadly no. No, but we did have like special outfits, like, the Power Rangers, all different colors and whatever. So I was like the green one, and my helmet had like dinosaur spikes, like a stegosaurus thing, and then someone else had like bat ears, and it was really cool. Like they do a good job with those live events, and the whole thing, like when it finished, there was it kind of just showed us like this to be continued screen, and the game itself right now is totally offline. Like you can't play it at all. When you boot the game, you just see that to be continued screen, and then I guess in an hour or so, once the event is completed, then that's when the new season will start, and there'll be more stuff. So these things have happened all the time. There was like Galactus event, and like now I'm kicking myself for not having played it, but it was cool. Like I had a good time. I think Fortnite is killer now that it doesn't have building, or you can avoid the building.
Yeah, that was a big barrier for me as well. And I mean, I don't know, we'll see. You only have so much time for like those like season pass style games and stuff, right? But
totally.
It definitely looks appealing. So how long does that last? It's just a couple hours, one day?
No, well, I mean, it's like, it started it was 12:30 our time. And so the event is like, you have a 90-minute window, I think, to queue in and beat it.
Okay.
Before it's done. But apparently you have to like, there's a lot of people that can't get in because it just gets so popular, and right. I don't know. I don't really know. I just kind of, my friends fill me in on how to do it, and I just show up, I'm the follow along, I guess, for that. But we're not here to talk about Fortnite for the rest of the show today, though, Kate. We have a lot of stuff, so let's get into the show. Of course, as we normally do, we'll start off by talking about the games that we have been playing, aside from Fortnite. And for the second half of the show, and usually we would save this for our news show, but because it is a state of play and a pretty big presentation at that, for Sony, we're going to spend the second half of the show today recapping the state of play from later last week and giving our thoughts at everything that was shown. And for listener mail this week as well, instead of answering a question, we actually have some listener feedback from what our audience thought of the state of play, and we'll incorporate that all into a big discussion in the second half of the show. Just if you wanted to write in as well for future episodes, you can do that at circlesandsquarespod@gmail.com, or on our Twitter @CNSpod. Of course, all the links are below wherever you're consuming this wonderful content that we're putting out there for you today.
Wherever you're experiencing.
Wherever you're experiencing. That's right. Okay, so we've got a couple games to talk about today, Kate, but I have a mystery game that I have been wanting to tell you about since I bought it last week. And for those that have listened to the show for a while, you'll know that every once in a while, I have this weird compulsion where I buy a game that's like $2 on the PSN or like on the Switch. And I'm just going in, I don't do any research of what it is. I'm just like, you know what? For some reason, this art, like this box art, has drawn me in, and I spent $2.99 on this game. And it happened to me the other day on the PSN. I was just browsing around, there's sales going on, and there was a game called Kruger, Kruger. And it's hard to Google it because there is a brand in the States called Kruger, which always comes up. But if you search the PSN store, you can find it. And it's got this interesting kind of pixel art style. It wasn't completely ugly, there was the gameplay that it showed in some of the videos and the cutscenes. I was like, for $2.99, I'm down for a platformer like this. So I bought the game, booted it up, and little did I know that this was one of those games that you can beat in like 10 minutes and get a platinum, just basically by running to the right-hand side and doing some really, really basic platforming. So I kind of sat down, and I got 30 seconds into the game, and I popped like 4 trophies, and I was like, I know exactly what this game is going to end up being. And so I've cheated my way basically into a fake platinum trophy. buying this shitty game that I would not recommend anyone spend $2.99 on, because it is just like the simplest, most basic platformer of all time. But I want everyone out there to know that adding to my list of games I've beaten this year is Kruger. And we'll have to wait and see at the end of the year if it wins any of the Circles and Squares awards for later on.
All right, so in before, because we always like do the same couple, we do mostly the same categories. We like to add a couple new ones. So I'm just saying now, James, if we're starting to plan it out, and you decide to add in the quickest game, or like the fastest game to beat category,
the speedrun category, yeah,
the speedrun category, I'm calling a little suspicious here.
I agree with you completely.
I'm looking at it and it looks cute.
Yeah.
It's deceptively not cute, but like the trophies are just going nuts. Like I'm just watching someone play it quietly, and it's just like literally every 30 seconds it's like, trophy collected, you got a coin. Trophy collected, you got
or like you jumped 5 times, and then it's like you jumped 10 times, and there's only 3 levels in the game, so I literally like ran through them. I think I died like 1 time. I mean, it was like no challenge, right? Just this really basic game.
Just got the 5 coin collected. Now this looks like it's a cute like first couple tutorial levels for what would be a real game. But then it just ends, huh?
Yeah, it does. So, I mean, I don't want to take any more time talking about this game, but if you're looking for a cheap platinum, I mean, Kruger's out there for you, okay?
The completionist in you is crying because you have 110 hours in Elden Ring and you're like half done. Take a little palate cleanser.
Yeah, you could. I mean, yeah, little palate cleanser is right. Anyway, let's talk about some real games that we actually care about. Starting with...
Oh, are we? I know it's on the list for today. One of them's a real game, absolutely.
It is a power list, I'll tell you what. Let's talk about a game that I just finished last week, and you've played a lot of too and loved it. It is Death's Door. The one way I will summarize up my feelings on this game is, wow, I should have played this earlier. Yeah. It was just a great experience. I mean, I don't know, you played this as well, so it's going to be a tag team discussion here. Where do you want to start talking about Death's Door? I know you've talked about it before, but I mean, looking back on it and reflecting now after the time you've had apart from it, like what is the one thing that stands out the most to you, do you think?
So I think this is one of those games where it's so cohesive. Like Death's Door to me is basically a perfect game. In the sense of what it set out to do, it accomplished it flawlessly. Like, it's not necessarily the most complicated game. It's not my favorite game I've ever played, but it is an exceptionally high quality game, and it is perfect at what it wanted to be. It knew its identity and was extremely successful.
Yeah, I agree too. And I think one thing I noticed about this game is it just has a lot of little details that I wasn't necessarily expecting. I was expecting it to be sort of like a, top-down 2D Zelda style kind of game that had some, more difficult combat and like elements of other stuff. And one thing I noticed right off the bat is like, there's those signs that point you in the right direction of where you need to go, and like it'll give you little directions, and you can slash those into pieces. And I mean, the signs will fall apart, and but the little detail goes even further. Like if you go to read the sign after the fact, the text will come up, but it'll be like cut off where you would cut the sign. And
you get like the top half of each character, but not the bottom.
Exactly.
Like, genuinely cut the sign in half.
Exactly. And I did that in the first 4 or 5 minutes that I was playing, and I was just like, wow, that's a really interesting little detail. And it does other stuff too. Like there's this sort of hub world you go to where all the doors kind of open up and you can go through different portals, but you're sort of in this hub world, I guess. I don't really remember what it was called, the House of Doors or something, or the Realm of Doors.
I think that sounds right.
Something like that. But there's little collectibles you find during the game, and I guess one of the desks in that central area is yours, I assume, and you have like the collectibles that you find start to stack up on your desk, and the further you get through the game, you're kind of it's sort of overflowing off like onto the floor.
Onto the floor.
Yeah, so I really like those details. Like it's better than just looking at your collectibles on a list in a menu or something, it's tangible and visible.
Yeah, it's very polished for sure. That's like a word that definitely describes this game.
And speaking of the collectibles too, and maybe we'll get into the level design a little bit, because obviously that's a huge talking point. But what I loved about it most is there's so many hidden things in the game. And some of them are the kind of things where it's like you'll have to backtrack later depending if you get a new power up. But you know, in games like this where there's lots of collectibles and like hidden sort of pathways and you can go around different things, and if you just notice there's like, oh, there's a little trail going around this corner, like maybe I can just follow this, and then the whole thing will spin and you'll all of a sudden be like a door you didn't see before. And I
Exactly.
loved it the way that you're always breadcrumbed along just a little bit. If you notice something, there's going to be a secret there. But in the converse of that is that you don't need to go around necessarily and like hit every little wall, or like, oh, I wonder if this is an invisible bush that I can just walk through to this new area. Like, it's never trial and error bullshit. It's always like, if you're observant, you'll notice the little areas where their secrets will be hidden. And so it really doesn't waste your time. It just makes you have to be really intentional with when you're discovering the secrets. And I really love that because it takes away that tedium of like, okay, I have to try and hit every bush in case there's a secret or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the only games that I've absolutely 100%ed. Like, we did everything. We found every single collectible, planted every single seed, like perfect 100% at this game. And it was for that reason. It's because it was actively fun to go back and try to look for things. And I think maybe the last like one or two seeds, or one or two, not the seeds like where you plant them, like last one or two we maybe looked up, just because like, okay, we've ran through everything. We could run through everything a third or fourth time, but it's tedious, so we'll just look it up. But it was definitely something like in games I typically don't tend to go back and do all of that stuff, because it's less fun than just moving on to the next. But it's exactly that kind of intentional level design that you can walk back and you walk through an area. It's like, oh, I didn't notice that tiny like link in the fence is broken in this one part, so I can go through it. And it's never, you never feel like you're running around with like a chicken, or I guess a crow, with your head cut off.
Yeah.
Like, you are intentionally looking for things, and you're rewarded when you notice something that seems out of the ordinary.
Yeah, definitely.
And the environments too are just a delight to go through. Like, they are so colorful, they're so creative and imaginative. And you know what, like, if you backtrack through something, it's like, it's great, you know, like, I get to look at it again and experience this one more time. The music is beautiful.
Yeah, and also you get so powerful by the end of the game too. Like, you begin to level up, and I don't know what kind of you went into, but for me, I ended up just, I maxed out like my attack power, and I maxed out the for both my ranged and my melee attacks, and then I sort of went into the one I didn't put any points into until the end was my movement speed. And as much as I wanted the movement speed to make it you know, faster to get across the game, I just felt like I was already pretty good at dodging in this game, and I didn't really need the movement speed as much as I needed some extra power on my hits, because some of the enemies in this game, especially the bosses, I noticed they can really have like a lot of health, and so I felt like that was the way to go, at least for me. And especially I just found myself using like the basic sword the whole time too, even though I found a couple other weapons.
Interesting, yeah. I think we use the daggers a lot. Little, like,
I honestly switched between the daggers for different enemies. Like, if it was an enemy where you could get a lot of hits, I'd switch to the daggers. But then if it was one where you kind of get in, do like, you know, don't have a lot of time, I would go for like the single kind of big hits with the sword more so. But you know, that's another thing I really liked about this game, is the fact that you can just switch the weapons out whenever you want. So you can really customize like how you're tackling each encounter. Whereas a lot of other games, I feel like you'd have to, you know, go back to your house and change your loadout, or go and respec something.
Or,
Whereas
like,
there's more flexibility here.
your weapons, so like if you want to use the other one, it's now like garbage in comparison, and so you're kind of locked into whatever you've upgraded. Yeah, this game has a lot of flexibility, and I think this plays into like with the collectibles being enjoyable to search as well, is that the length of the game is perfect. So I don't know how long it took you, but for me, full completion was 16 hours.
Yeah, I think it took me 11 to get through the main game, and then I did a little bit of sort of completion stuff after, but not a whole lot. So.
Yeah. So full completion was 16 hours, and I think I played a little slow because I was playing with a friend, so it was like passing the controller back and forth, and so, you know, you take the time to stop and chat for a second, and that elongates the playthrough versus when you're just kind of in the zone doing your own thing. But I think that's perfect. I think the game, I would have definitely been happy to play another area and fight another boss, and I wasn't getting like burnt out on the game. But I think the length is perfect, right? Because it's silly in a lot of ways. It's lighthearted. It's a fun.
It's a really funny game that I was not expecting it to be so funny. Like, there's that character Pothead, And
Pothead.
I mean, he has the greatest gaming quote of all time. He's like, "Judge me not by the shape of my head, but by the deliciousness of the soup inside." And I'm just
That's
like,
right.
I am
And
gonna start saying that.
not, those aren't words to live by, then
Those are words to
I
live
don't
by.
know what it is. It's him, and there's that one, like, the two guys who work at the Hall of Doors, and one of them's like super into their job and is super excited about getting a new typewriter, and the other one's just like, I fucking hate working here, like I want to go home. And so there's some fun little commentary there. But it's like there are collectibles, they're fun to find, but there aren't so many that you at the end of the game you 50% and you're just overwhelmed. Like I can't be bothered to go back and find 50 more collectibles.
Yeah.
But at the end of the game, if I can be bothered to go back and find 8 more collectibles, then maybe I will.
Yeah, definitely. And the design, I think, like the last thing I wanted to say about the level design is just, it's like a puzzle, right? And a lot of these things, and you'll either be able to get them right away, or you'll be like, okay, I gotta come back here. But there was this one instance where the game, like, it knew what it was doing and it faked me out. There's like these EXP orbs that you find that you can find to help you level up, and there was one that was kind of close to me, and I could see it, and I was like, oh, I don't know how to get up there. I'm just gonna push on. Maybe I'll find it later. So I continued going, and then lo and behold, like the next screen that I went to, it actually took me not only right by where I actually needed to go to get that experience token, but and I originally thought I was going to have to walk past it and come back later. So not only did I get that orb, but also with it, it led me, like, there was a second orb right behind it. So I actually went from thinking I was going to have to come back to actually getting 2 times as much as I thought. And the game, like, knew it was trying to fake you out. By like thinking you're gonna have to come back, and then actually rewarding you with more. And it was just such a, like, that moment was like, oh, the game really, like, it deceived me there. It actually ended up being different than what I expected. And I don't know, I love that kind of design. It's sort of similar to the Metroidvania style, where you're like, oh, I can unlock that door later, but I gotta come back, or I've got to remember where these things are. And I really like that design. But here's the thing for me that I've noticed, because there's just a couple things about this game that, like, I don't know, like, for me, when I'm playing, I remember back to Metroid Dread, and for some reason, that 2D kind of setting, I could map that out mentally so much better. Like I can visualize that map a lot better. In this game, there's no map, and that's fine. Like, you don't have to have a map, I guess. But I found myself a few times being like it was hard for me to conceptualize, like, the layout of the area, and especially when I went back to that sort of main area where the death's door itself is, and you have to go back to talk to that crow. Like, I don't know, like, I found myself getting really lost there, and for some reason, like, the mental map just didn't. I think this game has kind of taught me, like, conceptualizing maps is something that I have a bit of a tough time with in certain games, and I think that might be part of the reason why it's like I never really get into a lot of Zelda games and stuff too. Is like, I just feel like I get lost.
You know what's really neat about that is your example of Metroid Dread is I have the exact opposite. I find I can navigate 3D games like this, or like a Souls game or something. I can navigate 3D games relatively decently because I'm in control. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's being in control and being able to look at any direction and kind of like recognize landmarks, and then you can kind of see them in the distance. But 2D games like Metroid Dread, I am lost 100% of the time. Like, you can take me 2 map tiles away from where I began my play session, and I no longer know where I am, and you could not pay me enough money to get back.
That's interesting. Hey, I guess it comes down to, like, how you visualize things in your mind and how you consider.
It must be, because for me, it's like, I think that the visuals of the landmarks are very important. It's like, okay, like, this area is more green, and so I'm kind of like going away from green into red, which is the next area, or like I recognize that building in the background, so I have to be, I'm vaguely to the north of it or whatever. And for whatever it is, or maybe it's the fact that I'm walking around 3D space, I don't know. But those I can orient myself with relative ease. 2D, I'm absolutely.
That's really interesting.
That is neat.
Interesting. Yeah, the only other thing, like, that's not a problem of the game. That's more just, like, I think how I conceptualize. I think my only critique of this entire game, and we were talking about this a bit earlier, I think this game could be made perfect if I could just rebind a couple of controls. Because by the time you get to the end of the game, you have, like, 4 different magic spells. You have the bow and arrow, and you have the fireball and the bomb, and then the hook shot, which are all really useful for different things. Like that, I don't know, the hook shot was cool, but my favorite was the bomb. That thing was so fun just to charge up and, like, smash guys with once you power it up.
It's like a big horde of, like, crappy enemies near the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a spirit bomb from Dragon Ball Z or whatever.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of these different spells, right? And the way you cycle through them is on the D-pad. You push up, down, left, right. But in some instances, there was a few times where it's like, okay, I'm either doing kind of this time challenge puzzle and I need to use the hook shot and another one at the same time. So I was actually using like my right thumb to go over and push the D-pad while I was still steering my character. Or in a battle, it would be nice to be able to switch and not have to take your thumb off your movement for a second because you don't want to get hit. I would have loved to see being able to cycle through your spells with the bumpers, because those buttons didn't do anything during the game, and being able to cycle through would be great. The other thing is, to shoot your magic, you have to like hold L2 and then hold B down, which is like it's like a 2-step process. And I feel like for me, I would have loved to be able to just hold B and then let go of B to shoot. And then, just simplifying those controls a little bit, or like giving me freedom to customize it. I feel like I could have just been that much better at the game. And it's just it's a minor nitpick, right? But I feel like it was just, those buttons aren't doing anything, especially the bumpers. Like, just let me cycle through.
I agree. When you brought it up the other day, asking me if you could swap or like if I had the same issue, what I wanted to tell you was like, yes, because I would often be charging at my hook shot and then walk off the ledge and die, because I was like, because you're using the stick to like aim it, right? But that's also walking, so you have to be kind of like, you do have to take a step to shoot your hook shot in a specific direction. But if you hadn't charged it up fully, then you just walk forward and don't shoot your hook shot. And so there would be times where like, and sometimes it would happen in combat and it'd be like, oh, in the heat of the moment. But other times it'd be like just walking casually, gonna go across, take this little shortcut that you don't need to take, but like, it saves you walking around, and you just walk over, just fall like out of nowhere to your death.
Yeah. Did you make it through that obstacle course later in the game? I guess you 100% of the game, right? So you did, like, in the ice area.
The icy one,
yeah. I had a lot of fun doing that challenge.
That was a lot of fun. Yeah, I think. So, what did you think of the puzzles overall? Because I found that none of them were incredibly challenging, but they were still rewarding to solve. Like, I felt like they hit that balance of like, they could have potentially been a little bit more difficult, but they were fun to complete, and they never felt like they were just totally brain dead.
Yeah, I found them fun to complete too. I don't think they were overly challenging really at all. Like, even that obstacle course one on the ice, that's probably the hardest puzzle that I can remember. And I mean, I died like probably two or three times, but then I made it to the end and like, flawlessly after that. And
yeah, exactly. And that one was more of an execution versus a like, you just think about and solve it. They're a little bit more, I guess, like timing versus thinking.
Yeah, the puzzles where you have to like hit the three, there's like 3 little notches you have to hit with your bow and arrow in a certain time frame. Like, that was fun to try and pull off. And there's a few where you have to, I had to kind of think about it for a sec, right? It's like, okay, well, I can shoot my arrow on this and this, but then I don't have time to get over here. So maybe if I stand here first and then, do these in a different order, maybe it works. And I don't think anything was overly challenging. Like, I didn't look up any of the puzzles or anything, but I appreciated them, and I think that they were the kind of puzzles where they were just challenging enough to make you feel smart to complete them, but you wouldn't get stuck on them, right? You wouldn't be like, oh god, I'll come back to this later, or like nothing like that.
Yeah, and I appreciate it, because this is the kind of game where like it's so snappy and so quick paced. Like, you're always running into a new enemy or a new area, or like an interesting vista to look at, or like a funny joke that's been set up. And so I think to have a time where you just like stall out and you're not sure how to proceed really kills the pacing in a game like this. So
definitely.
I appreciate that they were simple enough that you could just kind of breeze through, but still fun and engaging. So
and let's talk about the combat a little bit too, because we touched on it a little bit, but I think the combat was just a ton of fun in this game. And the way that you don't have a super huge amount of moves you can pull off. Like, you kind of have your basic combo, you have all those different projectiles, and then you have, you can do a charge attack, or you can do that one where you like run and then do like a flipping hit. I never really even did that one. But the way the combat really makes itself interesting to me is the way that you can interact with the enemies. Like, you can hit all their projectiles back at them, or you can purposely leave the projectile shooting enemies so you can hit their projectiles at other enemies on the screen and then just kill those weak guys later. And especially in the, what are they called? Avarice, I think, right? Where you go into those sort of challenge rooms at the end of when you're getting a new ability. Yeah, when the chests eat you. Those were some of my favorite fights in the whole game, maybe even more so than some of the bosses, just because you get to see what it looks like when you're taking on all the different enemies of a certain area at once, and how you can, you know, use those projectiles and shoot them back, or how those certain enemies will like roll across the screen and you can guide them into other enemies and like use them against each other, almost like resources, just as much as you're trying to fight them yourself. I had a ton of fun with those challenge rooms and sort of figuring out, okay, well, if I use this weapon, or this spell is going to be the best for this, or you know, just different ways to tackle it. I think those were great challenges, and I think looking back, like, those were some of my favorite moments of the whole game.
Yeah, I agree. I think it makes really good use of the flexibility of, like, yeah, all weapons are available at all times, all your spells are available, and you're intended to kind of swap through them mid-fight for what you need. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can approach it, despite your tools all being very simple when you first look at it. And I love as well the mana system. I think it's so elegant.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yes, and I think if looking back on it, when I first spoke about this game, I think that's what I harped on a lot about. So maybe I don't have to do that twice, but you know how it works simply is that your mana bar has like however many, like 4 notches, whatever. Each spell costs 1. I think the bomb costs 2 because
it does, yeah.
Longer.
And the hookshot costs 0.
Hookshot costs 0, which I'm a big fan of. But every time you cast a spell, it uses that notch. The mana only regens when you hit something. So it makes this really elegant flow of combat where you can't just sit and spam your range spells, and but you're still incentivized to use them because they're quite powerful. So you'd sling a spell, roll in, get a couple hits, roll out, sling another spell, and then you're back in the fight. And it's just this like wonderful balance that always felt like it was dynamic for every single fight. And like, it's just such a simple system, and I can't believe I've never seen it in a game before.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. It surely must have been done like that in some other games, because it just works so well. I remember clearly too, there was that one, so there's these kind of other, I guess, sub bosses you fight, and they what they do is when you beat them, it upgrades the spell that they correspond to. And the one that upgrades the fire spell, that guy was very tough. Like he would put like fireballs going around his body, and my whole strategy was like, okay, I'm gonna just try and use as much range attack as possible to beat this guy, so I'm not getting in the way of the fireballs. But the thing is that, like you said, it only works for so long. You still have to go and try and hit him. So I'd find myself like, okay, I've used all my projectiles, I really have to go in and time this hit. Like, I wasn't even going to hit with the purpose of doing damage. I was just going in to recharge my mana and then get back out and spam from far away. But it would have been a totally different fight if you could just restore your mana else like another way.
Exactly. That system feels much more compelling than like, okay, and then I'll pop a mana potion, I'll fire 3 more spells. Okay, I'll pop a mana potion because I've been collecting 30 of these, and like,
and I've been saving them because I never use them.
Exactly. And so everything felt really organic. There's no like, I don't want to use the word cheese because it's not necessarily cheese, and like, you have a lot of options of like, yeah, shooting projectiles back, and there's a lot of ways to deal with things, but they always feel like compelling, and they always feel like you feel smart when you figure out a strategy like that.
Yeah, the last thing I wanted to bring up really about the game is just kind of, I think you might have talked about it before too when you brought it up, the game, but just how it kind of deals with death and like that whole idea of like passing on. And you know, it really brought me back to Spiritfarer in a way, just because I mean that game obviously is all about death and like the circle of life and all that stuff, but I thought it was just such a touching moment to when they make you pay homage to the bosses after you defeat them. Like you'll defeat the boss, and the boss will then be there's like a gravekeeper in the game, I guess, that you know, takes care of that.
Deadstone or something. It's like, what's his name? It's like Headstone.
Yeah, Stonehead or something like that. Yeah. But anyway, he like performs a funeral basically for the boss, and after you beat them, you're kind of just put in this little room, and he'll say a few words about the enemy, and then he'll also say like the motivation about them, like you know, there's the one boss, and it's like, oh, he was corrupt, like looking for power, and it got the better of him. And you know, it kind of humanizes the bosses in a way where other games you'll just, you know, defeat the boss, get their power up, and then you're just on about it, and you kind of don't think about the fact that you've taken a life. And it's not like, you know, super introspective. Obviously you kill hundreds of enemies on the way over to the boss, but something about just being put in that room and like recognizing the boss for who they were, and there's no time limit on it. Like you can literally stay there for as long as you want. Like you could just put your controller down and just, you know, be there around that death and then just leave whenever you're ready. And you know, some of them are kind of funny. Like there's the one, it's like there's like a creature you go kill, and the guy, the gravekeeper's like, you know, telling about the radiant beauty to some, and others like, you know, it's like this ugly abominable snowman kind of character. But I think the humor, yeah, the humor goes a long way to help out too. But it's just really interesting how it makes you think about the cycle of life.
Yeah, there's a level of depth to it that I did not expect going into that game, and I definitely spoke about it, and I always like that perspective. It's funny, I've like one of my big D&D characters I'm playing right now is kind of like Death's Door inspired in a weird way. But I just really like that perspective they have, and like, because your job and what you're doing is collecting these like bosses' souls, because you're a reaper, and so you go collect the souls of the dead. And I just like that perspective of like, death is a natural thing and it has to happen. And, you know, it's sad, but it's also like how new life grows, and it's making sense. And it's just the natural cycle of like, that's the order, and that's that person's place in this world. And now like they'll be remembered, and we respect them for having been here, and now someone else is able to take that place and be like, new life springs from death.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a more positive and like rational,
it's like an objective look at what it is, honestly. Like that is the way that death works, you know, like it is. And the whole story of the game, I mean, we've been pretty spoiler generous, but like, you know, the ending of the game, like the boss wants to live eternally and like is trying to fight against the inevitable, and it obviously doesn't work out. And I think that is just, you know, it's a powerful message to anyone playing. Is like, look, this is a reality of everyone's existence. And yeah, the game just does a really good job, I think, of like talking about that.
It felt really meaningful to me after I played it. Like I thought on it for days after, and I could imagine like, you know, because this is a game where I think like it's great for anyone. I feel like a younger audience could play and enjoy this game. And it's the kind of thing I feel like, you know, like as a young person who's never really tackled these kind of subjects, this could be your first sort of like, you know, time where you've delved in a little bit more seriously into the concept of death. And I think it's a very positive way of looking at it. So I think like I didn't expect that coming into Death's Door. I thought it was going to be a fun, like colorful adventure, and it is absolutely that, but there's more to it as well.
Yeah.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. I have one question for you, because I obviously didn't want to spoil this for you. And this is going to maybe be this is going to be a spoiler for the end of the game, so bear with us. But what did you think of the final boss?
Man, that final boss was one of the more enjoyable bosses I've fought in a long time in a lot of games. I love how it really challenged you to I don't know if I want to say it challenges you to use your whole kit, because I think you don't necessarily have to do that, but it really forces you to be very mindful of dodging a variety of different attacks. There's like lasers, there's the rolling move, there's a bunch of swords. Like it's really a challenge.
And then there's sections where you stop and do platforming in the middle of the boss, because he's like kind of running away from you. And I just thought like I was so blown away by that boss fight, because it really felt like such a culmination of everything you've done up until that point. And there was an aspect of all the previous bosses. There was an aspect of like some of the other like platforming challenges in the game. And there's like sections where you're just dodging instead of able to fight. And I just thought it was such a good way of showcasing like, this is everything you've learned to be good at during the game. Now put it together and fight this final boss.
Yeah, I love that too. I think it's a great test. It's like when you're in university, right? And you have that final test, and you're like, okay, things from the first month of the course, like I don't remember this anymore. But you use your skills throughout the game enough where by the time you get to the end, I think you have such a masterful control. Especially me, like I beat this game in the span of like 3 days, so I really was like up on my skills by the end. You know, that last boss too. Another good thing about it, and I think this is a great example of why live systems suck in games and checkpoints are way better, because this final boss, like you're saying, there are a few phases. There's like the more dodging phase, and you're chasing the boss down and avoiding things, and then you finally get to the battle. But there's a couple points where the game does give you a checkpoint, and the whole thing, when you add it up, like between the fights and the running and the dodging and then the final encounter, like it's a really long fight. And I can totally see myself having been like, going through a few lives, like game overing, restarting from the start, and being like, oh my god, like I'm going to put this down for a couple days, I'm going to come back to it. And there's a chance when that happens in a game that you don't come back to it, you don't pick it up, and you miss it, right? And this is like I said, like it's probably one of my more favorite boss fights that I've gone through in a long time. And I think that it's just amazing now that we're finally over that terrible system of having lives, because it would have just prevented probably a lot of people from getting through to the end of this. But now the way that's set up, if like once you make it past that chasing the boss down part, it will checkpoint you kind of at the combat section, so you can you've completed that one section, and now you can get just to the fight, and you can actually progress and make it all the way through. Yeah, it's phenomenally done.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. I'm so glad you said that, because that to me stuck out as like, I'll always remember Death's Door, and I'll always remember that fight. So yeah. I think now what we need to both do, especially since I know it's also on Game Pass, and spoilers for the second half of the show, it's coming to another subscription service, is that we've got to check out Tunic. Because Tunic to me seems, whenever I look at Tunic, I think of Death's Door. They seem very similar. It's a bright world. You play as a little animal in the same kind of like top-down perspective. There's combat with dodging, and there's going to be puzzles, and it's Zelda inspired. And so yeah, how much I enjoyed Death's Door, I now want to play Tunic and compare the two.
We should. I think that'd be a good plan. I've heard some things about Tunic being quite cryptic and whatnot, and so I'm wondering like how I'm going to perceive the puzzles, because like I said earlier, one of the things I really appreciate about this game is like, it's not cryptic, you just have to be observant and you'll know where the secrets are. Whereas I'm wondering, like, I wonder if Tunic's the same way, or if it is more of like that, extra hidden stuff that you have to really, really stumble across, kind of like as a fluke. But it'd be cool to compare. We should do that. Anyway, let's change gears a little bit. We have one more game to talk about on this episode, and it's something quite different than than Death's Door. We got together. I bought this on a sale a little while ago. One of the few physical games I own on the Xbox. But I picked up Super Monkey Ball Banana Blitz, which is. Or is it Banana Blitz or Banana Mania? It's Banana Mania. That's the good one. There's two games that are named very similar. One of them is apparently really good, which is the one I have. One of them is bad. But this is basically a remake of the first three Super Monkey Ball games, all put onto one collection. And wow, we played a lot of Monkey Ball growing up. I think we had, what did we have? Super Monkey Ball 2 was the one that we had.
I mean, they are so similar, and it's so hazy.
It's true. So, I mean, Super Monkey Ball is just, it's like an arcade game, right? It's like rolling marbles along little obstacle courses, and it's like one of those tilting puzzles, and you're trying to get the ball in the goal or whatever. But it's just so crazy and ridiculous, and some of the levels are just so easy and mindless, and then you'll get to one where you're like, there is no way this can be completed without some major fluke happening.
My God, it was so hard. Like, it's one of those games you go back to, and it's like, how the hell did we ever play it as kids? Because this is outrageously, not that I think we never.
I don't think we ever beat it. Yeah.
But it was outrageously difficult once you get past like the first like 10 tutorial levels. I'm like, holy shit, like these stupid monkeys. Like, it's so hard.
I know. Well, I think we played more of the mini games traditionally too, right? And there are a lot of mini games in this game. And I mean, the number one that stands out is the target practice, where you go up this ramp with the ball, and then you come up and you hang glide, and then you're trying to drop basically down onto these floating targets in the water. And
it's kind of like darts, except you're the living dart, and you need to like land and not roll too far, and like anticipate how far your momentum's going to carry you.
Yeah.
And that is genuinely a hell of a lot of fun, and also more difficult than I remembered, because I remember the game being easy, and we fell into the ocean many times.
Oh yeah, it was. I mean, like I said, it's a different version, so I think it's a little different. But that whole thing of like flying through the sky, and you're trying to collect the power ups, but you need to make sure you have the distance to make it to the target. And then, do I try and land on the 500 point square, but it's like on the top of this pyramid, and if I miss, I'm just gonna roll down to my death and score 0. Like that whole concept is so fun to me, of that mini game specifically. And there was other ones too, like we tried out. The monkey dog fight, which was flying around, and that game was very difficult. I'm not so sure I liked dog fight a whole ton. What else did we do?
Baseball was pretty good. That was a new one we hadn't tried. The baseball was pretty fun.
Baseball was fun. Yeah, I think that was probably the second best game on there actually, because we tried
you got absolutely destroyed, but the baseball was fun.
The baseball was fun. I think the kayaking game really was not overly fun.
So bad. It was just like no controls at all.
But yeah, it's just a fun party game, I think, is what this comes down to. Like the mini games are fun. Will you sit and play bowling for hours, or like the race game for hours? No. But is it fun to click through and do like 1 or 2 rounds of the games that appeal to you in a group setting? Yeah, hell yeah, it's fun. Like it's a really good time. There's tons of unlocks. Like you're always earning tokens and kind of earning like in-game sort of achievements, and there's lots of stuff you can buy. Like you can customize the characters, you can unlock other characters like Sonic's in there and Tails and what's his name, Kiryu from from Yakuza's in there. Like what a ridiculous character to put in Super Monkey Ball.
Just mad the whole time because like you're in those little like colored balls, right? And like all of the ones are these monkeys and they're like haha, like so cute, having a good time, like goofing off. And then you have the Yakuza guy and he's just pissed off the whole time. He's like, what the fuck is going on?
Exactly. But and there's tons of different game modes, and I mean we unlocked the dark banana mode, I think, whereas like you got to go through the levels and avoid touching any of the bananas, which is like a whole nother level of difficulty, which is on top of the game's insane challenge.
Hard enough, but like
yeah,
I mean I guess it's easy to avoid the bananas when you just fall off the course, but that's not ideally what you're meant to do.
Yeah. What I will say about the game that makes it so exciting, there were so many moments where I feel like the levels are designed in 2 ways. There's either the obstacle course ones, which are like, okay, there's no bullshit going on here, I just have to execute this sort of challenge course. And then there's the other ones where there's like launchers and like things moving around, and you feel like you have a lot less control of the game, and you're just kind of trying your best, but kind of hoping that the RNG gods will kind of
like, help you. Just sort of trial and error, like YOLO. Eventually, like I'm gonna get like yeeted in the correct instead of off the stage.
Exactly. So I think those levels were a lot more frustrating. But what I will say is when you complete one of those levels after sitting there for 5 or 10 minutes, it's like we were sitting there on the couch, like passing the controller back and forth trying to beat these, and it's like, yeah, like we did it. Because it's just so fucking hard.
This is the kind of game that is like, you will sit down and not give a shit at first. You're like, yeah, it's just a cute party game, whatever. But an hour in, you will be genuinely like cheering your heart out when someone finally beats the bullshit stupid level. And then you go on, you get a nice level, and then the next one is going to be another bullshit. So then you're back to like, oh my god, like please, you have to pass the controller off. I don't see how you play this game single player and like don't lose your mind.
Agreed.
But playing co-op is a ton of fun.
Agreed. Oh man, what a good time. Anyway, I'm really happy I bought it. I think it was well worth. I think I got it for like $20, and I think I've had more than $20 worth of fun already. And once in a while when you get together, it's just fun to play some monkey ball.
Yeah, just grab a drink, grab a friend, grab a monkey ball, and you're ready to go.
Hey, if you're making this game a drinking game though, you got to really tone down the rules, because you will die a lot. It cannot be a drink of death, because you'll never do it.
It's just it's just casually have a drink. But yes, like please, Circles and Squares does not encourage you to literally die playing monkey ball.
we do not encourage monkey ball induced alcohol poisoning. Okay, well that's monkey ball, unless you had any final thoughts on that. But I mean, it is what it is, right? It's a silly party game, and everyone should experience it at least once, because I think it's a rite of passage. Kate, let's start talking about this giant state of play that happened a couple days ago. There's a ton of announcements that came out of this one, and of course we have some listener mail about this as well. We've had some people respond, but I guess just before we get into the breakdown of the show, what did you think overall of the state of play?
I had a fantastic time watching it, and I'm super excited because this is kind of kicking off like the summer of play and everything that's going to be going on. So it was a good first event. I think for me personally, there weren't a ton of things I'm excited for, but I think that's just specifically for my taste. I think overall there was a good variety, especially with part of the show being dedicated to VR, which isn't going to be for everybody. The second half of the show, there was tons of stuff. It was a lot of fun, and yeah, I had a great time.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think I don't know. I really enjoyed this show a lot, to be honest with you. And I think while it wasn't like there was no like, oh my god, it's God of War, you know, like some amazingly huge first party exclusive. Well, I mean, I guess there was kind of at the end, but I think it was probably the most consistent state of play we've ever had in terms of like there
But
was.
you know what?
Oh, I was just gonna say there was no point where I was like, oh, I'm bored of this. Like I don't really want to watch. Like everything happened at a good pace. All of the announcements were. I don't think any single one of them was really like, oh, I don't care about this at all.
Yeah.
So I mean, even Street Fighter, like I don't play that at all. But even that trailer was like, wow, this actually looks pretty cool for Street Fighter. So I really enjoyed it.
Right? Yeah. Like that's a pretty big deal. And so
yeah, I really enjoyed it.
And you called no God of War because you're like they'll do their own thing, and I think you're right. They're just gonna have their own state of God of War because that's big enough, and like you have 30 minutes of other great games to show about. People will just watch the God of War one for God of War later.
Well, exactly right. And the other thing too is that I feel like they're always so clear about communicating what is going to be in these shows. They tell you on a blog post what's going to be in it. And whenever there's a big game, they will tell you. I mean, every once in a while in a blue moon, will they show something new and unexpected? Sure. But if it's something like God of War that we know about and we know exists and is supposed to come out later this year, they're not just going to randomly put it in a state of play anymore. Like, that's just not how it works. You were told in advance, we're going to get information about God of War on this state of play. And so it's just, they do a really good job, I think, of setting the expectations. And I think this one, too, just because of its consistency, ended up being better than expected, in my opinion. Anyway, just to get into quickly what our listeners thought as well, we did a poll on our Twitter account, again, at CNS Pod. And I think that the majority of people agreed. We had 52% of our respondents saying it was better than expected. 21% said it was the best yet. And then pretty much everyone else was what expected. I think we got one vote for that it was disappointing, but I mean, fair enough, right? Everyone's got their own opinion, but overall I think it was pretty well received. So I guess without any further ado, why don't we go through announcement by announcement and give it a little chat.
Yeah, absolutely. So they kicked it off pretty hot, and we started with the Resident Evil 4. And so this, I guess, is a remaster.
It's a complete remake, yeah, like just like 2 and 3.
Complete remake, right? Just like they did with 2 and 3. So it looks like it's going to be the original game, but they are going to add some things. Whether that ends up being, we don't know. But the other cool thing about this is that it's also going to have VR.
VR for Resident Evil Village, not for Resident Evil 4.
Not for 4? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Maybe that's what I got mixed up with then. But yeah, so yeah, we got Villages getting VR, which like, oh my god, are you crazy?
That would be fun, right?
They did for 8 as well. Biohazard got VR, and I think that's even scarier than Village. So, I mean, good on you if you can handle that. But yeah, I mean, 4 is cool. You played a couple of the remakes.
I played half of 2 remake, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, I just kind of fell off of it, I guess. I mean, I don't. It was scary, to be honest. And like, if I had someone to play with, I'd probably go through and finish it. But by myself and kind of being halfway through the game, I don't know if I'm there in my life right now. But I think this looks really cool though. Like, I have a lot of respect for these games. I think that these like remade versions of what these older Resident Evils are just like they're mind-blowingly beautiful. I think they literally have some of the nicest visuals. Like everything just looks so scary and wet, and like the characters are just great, you know. And
gross and dirty.
Yeah. So I was listening to what podcast was it today? I can't remember, but I remember I heard that apparently this game was originally in development for last gen and current gen. But apparently, like somewhere in development, they decided to go only with new gen just to really focus on like the visuals and the graphics and really like make this a premier game in terms of like performance. So I'm pretty excited to see what that ends up looking like, especially since it's like a reimagined kind of version of one of the. Yeah. I mean, Resident Evil 4 is like one of the pillars of the industry, right? Like people really hold it up.
It's the Leon Kennedy, and he's a big guy, and it's the escorty one. I know my Resident Evil knowledge is like way lacking, but it's one, and Leon's there, and he's, you know, the hunkiest guy in Resident Evil, so
right.
Exciting. I probably play it eventually. Like me and my friends do horror games from time to time. We ran through 8, we ran through Village, and enjoyed them, and so we've been wanting to do some of the older Resident Evils as well. And this is just the perfect opportunity to pick them up. So we're gonna do like
Yeah.
we have 2 and 3 already to go through, and then by the time we're done that, maybe we pick up 4. But I think eventually we will, just because horror games are it's tough to find good ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, this is interesting too. Like one of my friends is trying to convince me right now to play the original RE4 together before this one comes out, just because the
oh,
original Resident Evil 4, I guess, is more of like a campy sort of actiony horror game. Like it was really where the series shifted to the action kind of focus for the first time. And this one, I think they're trying to dig into a little bit more horror than the action side of it. So I think it might be interesting to have that comparison when this
right,
does
because
come out.
the newer games have slightly like gone. I mean, it depends. Like Village brought a lot more action back in
Mm-hmm.
after took it out, but I think overall they're going for a little bit more of like, even if there is action, they want that horror tone to it.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it'll be interesting to compare. That's for sure. But yeah, look, I mean, what a way to start the show, right? Like Resident Evil 4, people love this. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's great.
that was exciting. Then of course we've got VR for Village. So I mean, if you were one of the Lady D simps, I guess you can play in VR now, and
Yeah, there'll
you
be some
know,
good screenshots coming out of that, I'm sure.
yeah. So good for you. Enjoy yourself. I don't think I'm gonna be revisiting Village. But hey, that's a ton of fun. And then so we went on to the next game we had. So this is kind of the VR section of the show now, which I think was smarter than doing it first. I think that's the way
Yeah,
where
and
you
it leads in nicely too, like from that Resident Evil VR announcement now into a couple more.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So we've kind of got the VR suite, and the next thing they showed is the Walking Dead Retribution, which kind of looked like a zombie horde kind of game, but you're tackling it VR, which again sounds horrific. And I'm too scared to take part in.
Yeah, I don't know about this one. Like for me, I like as people know, I'm excited for PSVR 2. Like it's something I'm interested in getting, but um, I don't know. Like I feel like of these two kind of zombie horror things, like I would be more interested in going through and playing Resident Evil Village. I think in VR, especially since you got the experience with that game, than I would be to play like this Walking Dead one. I think to me was probably the least interesting VR game they showed.
Agree.
At least for my taste, but I know a lot of people are Walking Dead fans, so those people probably will be
Yeah,
looking forward to it.
I agree. The next one seemed a bit more interesting to me. So this is No Man's Sky VR, and I think like I'm not No Man's Sky isn't a game that I think I'll be getting into anytime soon, but I do think it's a great game for VR because so much of it is like exploration. I can imagine like flying around in your ship is pretty cool, like outside and you land on the planet and you look around and you're scanning plants and stuff, and it just seems like a game that like is crazy that it exists in the first place, and then playing it in VR seems such a natural way to continue that.
I've had a morbid curiosity about No Man's Sky for a while, just because of the redemption, right? Like how poorly it
Yeah,
was received at the start, and just how much work they've put into this game over the
yeah.
years to make it something that people really like. And something about
Mhm.
VR, I feel like this actually might be how I get into this game. Like I love Star Wars Squadrons back a couple of years ago and like being in that pilot seat. And I think just being in a pilot seat in VR and getting to fly through space, and then the way the game is so inherently focused on exploration, I just think lends itself really well to a VR experience. And so those two things together, like this looked like something I would definitely be interested in when I do get the VR.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And then so then the final VR presentation was obviously the big heavy hitter. We got the Horizon Call of the Mountain, and I gotta say, like VR games are starting to look pretty decent. But my God, this game has no business being as pretty as it is for a VR game. Like it looked so nice visually, and like it genuinely just looks like a fun game, VR and non VR, and like it's got everything that the VR does well. Like the bows are super cool. Like the climbing actually looks like you're decently climbing, and I'm gonna be sick playing it.
Yeah,
It just what a cool world to experience in VR.
yeah, I'll tell you what. I mean, Horizon is a series, like one of the biggest PlayStation series that you and I kind of have a blind spot on. But that being said, I cannot wait to play this in VR. I think it, like you said, like it's maybe the first example we've seen of a game in VR that actually looks visually like, you know, like really high quality first party kind of AAA experience. And I mean, the climbing to me, I just hope it's not a climbing simulator. Like there's even they even make like a climbing pun at the end of the trailer where they're talking about like you're making a climb or something like that. Like
you're climbing up you're ascending a mountain.
A mountain. So I hope it's not just like a climbing simulator, but I mean, hey, that might be fun in itself.
It could be decent combat as well with the
Yeah.
mech.
Yeah,
so
it did.
You got your bow, which is always a good VR weapon, and
yeah. I'm definitely gonna play this when I get the VR. I don't care if I have to look up stories of the Horizon or like videos of the Horizon story. It just looks really, really amazing.
I'm tempted to play them, and maybe this is good incentive to do so. And good things come to those who wait, because if we picked up Horizon Forbidden West on its release day, we would have missed out on this nice new update they're giving, which is like a new game plus being added. There's an ultra hard mode, there's outfits, new weapons. So they're pulling a Ghost of Tsushima, and just like, I guess it hasn't been a full year since it's been out, but it's been a few months, and they're like, hey, here's some extra stuff for free, have fun, keep playing. And that's awesome.
I find it interesting that those, like, Tsushima is a good one too. Like Tsushima and Horizon Forbidden West getting these new game plus modes, to me is like, I really appreciate they're adding it in. I think it's awesome. Like there's tons of huge fans of those series. I love Tsushima myself, but when I think about new game plus, to me those are the kind of games where it's like, is that really the best thing you could have added to it? Because those games, and like, they're so big and so expansive and so long. Like, I just wonder how many people are going to play like 80 hours of Horizon Forbidden West and then be like, oh, let's go into New Game Plus and do that again. Like, it seems to me like New Game Plus works better in games like, Ratchet and Clank or like Miles Morales, where the game itself is like 15 hours or less. And it like is totally like the kind of thing you could replay in a way more reasonable time frame.
Or a game that's like Dark Souls does it too, right? But it's so that you can play again and it's like more challenging, or like you get like what Night Game Plus is nice for, or I don't know if it would work like this in Horizon, but especially for Souls, it's like I got this really cool weapon and I got this really cool build at the 80% completion mark of the game, because that's where you like have the stats to use it, or like we physically find the weapon. So now I take it into Game Plus and I can play through the whole game with it, and also like it's more difficult. So it's kind of like a difficulty scaling and also getting to use new stuff. But then there's also an ultra hard mode, so that's just difficulty from the beginning. And so I think they're more just to like, you've accumulated a lot of tools and now you get to use your tools through the whole game instead of just at the end when you're finally like maxed out on everything, is the appeal of a new game plus.
Yeah. No, I mean, I totally get it. I'm looking at it logistically, and it's like, are people really going to play like, hundreds of hours of these? Like, I guess they will. There must be a reason they're investing in it.
Yeah, there are definitely. I think our friends over at Loud Thumbs might have a few things to say to you about what I put in hours in Horizon. Absolutely.
Well, sure. I just wonder what the return is, like what percentage of people that play that game will even get to the end of it because of the length, and then what percentage of the people that do beat it will then go and re-enter New Game Plus. Like, it's got to be a fairly small section.
Low, because like you said, they're massive games. There's so much to do and explore, and like you can beat the game without even looking at half the map, I would imagine.
Right. That's my only argument with it. Like, I think it's a great thing. Like, put it in every game, right? But
I would never do Game Plus, but it's just like, you know what, that's awesome. They didn't have to do it, and they did, and like, please keep doing this. Please keep being like Returnal, and like now there's co-op and a new like survival mode, and Ghost of Tsushima, like now there's all this extra shit, and just please, they're taking care of us so well, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So that kind of closed off the VR section, and we get into the rest of the games here. And as a fun little quality of life, they also announced that Spider-Man is the next game coming to PC.
Yeah, and it's not just Spider-Man either. It's Spider-Man Remastered, which is even better.
Right. So that's pretty exciting for someone who hasn't picked up that game yet. And people are always crying, like, put more PlayStation games on PC, so here's another good one coming to the library.
I can only imagine how beautiful Spider-Man will be and how amazing it will feel to swing around that city, even like when people have those insanely like overclocked PCs with like 120 frames a second and stuff. Like, man, it is going to be incredible.
I bet they're really going to feel like Spider-Man. Okay. So that's horrible and will never not be a joke. But moving on, this next one was the one I called out. I was hoping we'd see more of. and I kind of got my wish, and also I feel like I've learned literally nothing, is we got another trailer for Stray. So it's like, from what I understand, the environment is amazing. You're like cat, robot, stealth, platforming, knocked over some bottles. We're adorable. Don't know what else is happening in the game.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This weird cat game still exists. Coming out pretty soon. It's gonna be on the PlayStation subscription, so that appeals to me because I don't know what it is, but I could just try it out and not commit to $80 for it. So
Is this a full price game? Do we know if it's going to be $80?
I don't
I feel like
know if
it's not. It's an Annapurna game, so I mean, those are
yeah,
usually, half price kind of titles.
you're
But
right.
yeah, I mean,
You're
the
right.
fact that it's coming to PS Plus though, very exciting for multiple
Well, it's
reasons.
coming out on the 19th.
Yeah, the 19th. Yeah.
That is, it's you're right. It's $38. So
Yeah. Yeah.
38 Canadian. So it is not a full price game, but it is a weird game that I'm not even really sure what it's about, but I'm still intrigued.
Yeah.
There's like a weird cyberpunk cat.
I
I
like the
don't know
look
what you
of it, to
do.
be honest. I think exploring that city
Yeah.
is really interesting. This game, I mean, the previous trailers for it, I think didn't really do a whole lot for me, but this one showed a little bit more of the exploration and the fact that there's, some enemies and you're kind of dodging. The environments look kind of interesting. I don't know if I would have played this originally, but because it's coming to PS Plus, I think I'm definitely going to check it out. We'll have to talk about it on the show. And the other thing too is that I just feel like it's really exciting that this game is coming like day and date to PS Plus. Like it's showing, maybe it's not quite the same as Game Pass where, so many things come out on release for free on the service, but this is showing like, hey, there are games that are coming out new and they're going to be free day one on the PlayStation service. And so I think that just adds to the value of what the extra and premium tiers bring. Provided this kind of thing keeps happening, but it is good news to see a game like this that people know and kind of. I mean, it's from Annapurna, right? It's not like a non-developer, and it's coming to the service, so that's great.
Yeah, I definitely have an eye on that one. So thank you for Stray. Um, the next one is probably the game I am easily the most excited for. And this is Callisto Protocol. To me, it just looks like Dead Space. That's the entire vibe I'm getting for this. Like it's another kind of sci-fi horror survival shooter kind of thing. So it's Dead Space, maybe slightly more violent, and the facial animation was the other thing I noted down in this trailer. I was like, holy shit, did that guy's face just look like real? Like he was sweating and he was scared and he was just emoting in such a like genuine way that it looked 100% like just an actor on screen, and it's just from the game.
Yeah, I would be sweating and scared too if I was in his position. I'll tell you what. Some of those enemies were very frightening looking, and there's like the one where his eye was like bulging out, sort of,
Yeah.
and
It was so gross
oh, it
and
was.
slimy, and
It
I love
was.
it.
So this game is from Striking Distance Studio, and I believe they're actually formed from a lot of the original Dead Space team members.
Okay,
So
that makes
that's what
sense.
you're getting the Dead Space vibes from. Is like this is basically a spiritual successor from a lot of the original Dead Space team, which is really interesting. This coming out sort of near the Dead Space remake.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated to see kind of how they're both received. But you're right. This is definitely one of the standouts of the show, in my opinion, as well. I really enjoyed Dead Space. I'm trying to think, like, I mean, I'm not a huge horror person, as we know, but if I was to play this or Resident Evil 4 Remake, I think I'd have a bit of a difficult time at this point deciding kind of which of those I'd be more excited for.
I think if I had to pick one, I would genuinely pick this game. But I'm slightly biased. I've played a decent amount of Resident Evil, and Dead Space has always been on my list, and I've never gotten around to it, so it's kind of new and exciting in that way. But this game just like spoke to me on a level of like, I am so incredibly scared. I want to sit down with my friends and play this. So
100%.
it's happening. So we got the so moving on. The next game is Rollerdrome, and this
Rollerdrome.
Rollerdrome. It's like the best name. So this reminded me, and it might be a weird comparison, but it reminded me of a more action-packed Super Hot.
Interesting. I thought it was like Tony Hawk with weapons, which is why I
I'm
thought you'd
out.
really be looking forward to it.
No, I'm out. I can't buy this.
Yeah, what a weird game. This is definitely like the what the fuck game of the show. Like it just kind of came out of nowhere. What an interesting concept though. It's like
Yeah.
the rollerblading is making a big comeback in games this year apparently.
Hmm.
But like you because roller champions just came out the other day on PS Plus. But yeah, Rollerdrome, like you're kind of going around a skate park and like flipping through the sky and then shooting guys in the head while you're going off a half pipe. Like it looks
And
really
there's like
weird.
you're moving and you're kind of doing the like Titanfall 2, like Jedi Fallen Order, like running across, like running along walls, and then you're like doing the super hot slow down time to line up a couple shots, and it seems like there's a lot going on. It's got a very unique art style. It reminds me a lot of, and I'm trying to think of the name of the game, and I can't. It's like I want to say it's Sage, but that's not quite right. But it's that game we saw a million times last year in trailers, and every single event, every single show, and it
Deathloop.
was like no. Yes, but not Death of the other one. The very like artistic looking one where you're like in that wasteland and she was like driving that like hover bikey
Oh
thing.
yeah, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yes. I can't
I
think of
can't
the name of
remember
that
the
game,
name
but
myself either though.
it's that kind of art style, but super hot and Tony Hawk and just a lot going on.
Yeah. It's
Um,
interesting. They're really trying to pump. I'm just reading through the PS blog right now. Apparently they have a lot of DualSense integration of like the triggers and stuff, and apparently also there's like 3D audio cues that are going to tell you where enemies are coming from. So I don't know like if that stuff's going to be huge and important, but it's cool they're adding it in. Um, I just don't know. Like it's a weird concept, and I thought this was a multiplayer game too, but apparently it's not. Apparently it's a single player game. So I don't know if that helps or hurts it, but I mean, to me, this game is going to live and die based on how it feels to control because when you're doing these kind of tricks and flips and moving around, like it's got to feel good to control all this stuff. Otherwise, I just think it's going to be frustrating based on how it looked.
so this is like weird games I could see being like really big on YouTube or like kind of like kind of blows up quickly and then fizzles out. But
Mm-hmm. The one thing going for it though, it is from Roll 7 who just released Ollie Ollie World recently, and I know the Ollie Ollie
oh yeah,
series has always had like a pretty big sort of cult following to it. So I wouldn't be surprised if at least if that kind of audience checks it out, and potentially this is maybe a little bit better than we expect, but who's to say?
it's possible. But you compared it to Tony Hawk, and so in principle, I will never play this game, and I apologize to the developers for you having ruined that for them.
Damn it.
We'll move on. Our next game is Eternights. Eternights. I'm not
Yeah,
sure
probably the
how
one
it's
of the
intended.
we need to rethink of how we're naming some of the games in 2022, guys. Come on, Eternights. I don't know.
Fornite. So this popped up, and immediately they got like the fancy like text on the black screen. I'm like, well, this is a JRPG, and certainly it is a JRPG. I don't know much about it. If it's a series, it looks kind of like cute and wholesome, and it said it's a dating sim. But one of the prompts was like R2 to hold
I
hands,
saw
which
that
is
too. I
like,
was gonna bring it up if you didn't.
oh. So like that's adorable. It looks like you know, it looks like the cute JRPG that's like very child friendly. Like the girls are wearing clothes, and the dating sim
Thank
aspect
God the
is the
girls are
holding
wearing clothes.
hands, and that's just it. Just looked kind of adorable.
Yeah,
The
you know
whole
what's funny about this one is I wonder how much Persona influence this one has because it has sort of that day cycle in the top right, like it's keeping track of
okay.
what day it is, and I mean, Persona is kind of a dating game too if you think about it. Like there
It
is
is a dating
romances in there. I mean, I
sim.
wouldn't say it's a dating sim, but you could argue that it has elements of
It's
that. So
I guess like part of the game is a life sim, and dating comes into
sure,
that.
yeah. So I wonder, like, to me, if the developers here are just kind of trying to do some of that Persona style stuff, but then instead of having turn-based combat, making it more of like a action style game.
Hmm.
I wonder, right? Like I don't think this looks like something I'm interested in, but if it is the kind of thing where it's like, hey, they're taking these Persona elements and just kind of changing up the gameplay loop, then maybe it'll be cool. I mean, who knows?
If you're gonna take stuff from Persona, take the soundtrack. That's the most important part. And then maybe I will be an Eternite one day. But if you want to fight stuff not in a JRPG necessarily, and you want to get really into some fighting, we of course had Street Fighter 6 you alluded to earlier.
With a
This is
brand
going to
new
be great.
logo.
A brand new logo. I'm excited for this. A brand new kind of like art direction as well, because in the past it's been very like like they had the ink style kind of art going on. And now this one is very graffiti based, which to my knowledge is new for the series, but looks actually pretty good.
I think the game
And
looked good. Like the graphics
yeah,
were cool. Ryu was very wide. Uh,
yeah, he's always pretty. He's a wide dude,
he's a
absolutely.
wide dude. Man, there's a lot about this game. I feel like Street Fighter V was one of those ones where I think it got off to a really rough start, and I know there was a lot of, you know, people in that community who wanted a lot more out of it. So the fact that this one's coming out and looking so good in the trailers, I think is really good for that franchise. I mean, I don't know a lot about Street Fighter. I'm really in the dark about a lot of this. I think you're more of an expert than I am. But one thing I think that stands out for me, just kind of reading through and learning a little bit about this game, is that they have that modern control type where you can enter a lot of the moves similar. I don't know if it's like a Smash Bros. They're saying here, and it's you can execute controls by pushing one button with a directional input. So to me, that kind of feels like, how Ryu might control in Smash, where you don't have to do like the quarter circles and all that stuff. And so, I mean, for someone like me that has zero interest in practicing fighting game inputs and actually finds that not enjoyable, that's really good news to me, because like if I could sit down and have that simplified control, like maybe I would enjoy it. But at the same time, like it's just not my jam to play these kind of games.
No,
And
they're definitely one of those things. Like if you're into fighting games, you're into fighting games, and if you're not, maybe double and again. But it's like it's a very divisive genre. But I like that. It's funny. Maybe they called it Nintendo and we're like, hey man, can we just get the Smash control?
well, I mean, Smash is just it just sells so much more than every other game. Like I feel like there's some kind of
Well, it's just so much more accessible to get into, I think,
mm-hmm.
right? It's like Smash just plays a little bit different, and like you said, I'm excited for this. Not that I'm gonna play it because I never got into playing Street Fighter, but I do really like watching it, and so I'm excited for the first. I guess it won't be this Evo. It says it's coming out in 2013, so maybe next year Evo Street Fighter 6 shows up. And the game is still pretty new and it's getting figured out, and like the pros have just picked it up. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm most
Mm-hmm.
excited for this in terms of like just watching some early tournaments, which will be super cool.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I think it's been like 6 years since Street Fighter V came out, so
it's been a
this
while,
is
right? It's been a while.
Mhm.
Yeah, it looks good. I don't know. Apparently, also there was a leak online about like some of the characters, and I guess I heard that was confirmed this morning. So if you want to look up the leak, apparently you can see like a lot of the
Oh,
roster, just for those that are interested.
right, or at least like the starting roster,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm sure there
Mm-hmm.
will be like season passes and of new characters
Yeah,
coming
yeah, sure.
in and all that good stuff. So there's a couple things left to go through. We've got Tunic, which is not a new game, and we agreed we're both going to play it, but it is coming to the PlayStation Collection, which is a fantastic game to show
Oh,
up.
it's coming to the collection.
I believe
Oh, I didn't
so.
know that.
I
That's good.
believe so. That is what I read.
I thought it
If
was
it's
just coming
not,
to PlayStation, but
I'm so sorry. It might just be. I don't know. Now I'm getting less confident. It's gonna be on PlayStation one way or another, and if not, just buy Game Pass. Sorry. Whoopsies. Am I legally allowed to say that? I don't know. Um,
hey, we make
well,
the rules here. We make the rules. You can say whatever you want.
exactly. We'll move along. Tunic looks great. So our penultimate game we got here is a game that I actually think looks really neat. It's called Season: A Letter to the Future, and this is the required artistic indie game
Yes.
that is good to show up in the presentation. And it seems like you're a journalist on a bike, and you're going around, and it's going to be sound based by the seams of it. It seems like you listen to things, whether that's people's stories or music in terms of like actual recordings, or music in terms of like just the natural sounds and listening to waterfalls. And so music being a big component of the game appeals to me a lot. I don't really know much else about it aside from it definitely has the trappings of one of those games that's like slow down, enjoy life, here's
Yeah.
some philosophical things to ruminate on a bit. And
Yeah.
this is an experience your character is going to go through.
I guess the point of this game, I guess, is that the world is coming to some kind of end, and you're like going through and like living out the remainder of your time and connecting with people and like exploring your environment. So yeah, I don't know. Like it might be a wholesome kind of thing, I guess. Like there's a realm where I might play this, but probably not. Like there's a lot of these kind of games that come out, and like I played Lake a little while ago and really enjoyed that one. But you really got to be in the right time and place to play something like this, I feel.
They're one you want kind of more experience in the game, and you got to be in that mood to be a little reflective. And for whatever reason, maybe it's the mystery of what's happening at the end of the season, or the music aspect. But this one appealed to me just that little bit more than a lot of these games do. Because I feel like you can definitely I'm in the mood for an art game, and there's like a million you can pull from a hat, and a lot of them are going to be good. But every now and again, one comes along, and there's that tiny little aspect to it. It's like this one stands out more. I'm going to actively seek it out versus look for one when I'm feeling up to it. So, yeah, kind of neat. It's very, very pretty as well. As
it is. I like the art a lot. Yeah.
So then we close out the show with a game I'm going to let you take the lead on because you're more of the expert here. And what I've got written down is Final Fantasy 16 Cool Dragons. If you'd like to expand on that.
Cool Dragons indeed, yeah. Yeah, this game for sure was great. I mean, we've heard a lot about Final Fantasy 16 kind of in the rumor mill, I guess, kind of coming out alongside that Stranger of Paradise type of game, which, I mean, I don't know about that one, but... Oh, man. Yeah, but this game, I mean, this is the next big mainline Final Fantasy game, obviously. It's been a while since 15. Then 7 Remake, I guess, was the other one. But yeah, this game to me looked just phenomenal. And what's interesting about it, I was reading a bit about it, and I guess like the thing about Final Fantasy is that all of the games like in the existence of pretty much the whole franchise have been directed by, the same 3 or 4 different people and really been helmed by the same kind of creative teams. And apparently this game is the first one where they're really injecting a lot of new blood into like the producers and directors of the game and like the people really in charge. And apparently a lot of the people involved in this one have had their hands on the Devil May Cry franchise. So I'm expecting it to be a little bit more, I mean, I guess 15 was action-based and like 7 is action-based, but I'm really expecting it to continue to be kind of that action-packed sort of combat. And I mean, I think that's what we sort of saw in the trailer as well.
Makes a lot of sense. I thought the trailer looked really like bombastic in that way, where it was just like that little bit more over the top than Final Fantasy often looks in terms of like how like board clearing the moves looks like they should just be, look like MMO late game and you just wipe the entire screen with some massive flurry, and it is very, very cinematic. Combat for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, there's still the big numbers hitting, you see an attack happen and it's like, 10,000 damage. And you're like, oh, is that a lot or is that nothing? I have no idea. I have no context for this.
Yeah, you do like a combo of like 30,000 damage. Like the health bar is like just slightly ticking.
But yeah, I mean, this game, it just looks really interesting to me. I'm definitely, this is near the top of the list. I think what else is interesting about it too is like, summons are a very big thing in Final Fantasy, and like always being able to get Shiva and Ifrit and Bahamut and all these guys to summon up. But this game seems to be like the characters in this are actually embodiments of the summons, and like that character they reveal at the end, there's like that creepy voice who you can only assume is one of the villains of the game, and they're kind of like, they say something about another character being named Ifrit, and I'm wondering if that's your character. And Ifrit is always one of the more popular summons and like a very powerful character in Final Fantasy. And so it just seems cool to me that like maybe the characters you're being and that are in your party are actually like human embodiments of the classic summons that always show up in these games. And I think that's a really interesting concept. Like a lot of emphasis on the summons being characterized more than maybe just being like attacks for combat. Could be a really cool idea. So
interesting twist on it, especially since like there's so much Final Fantasy now, and they're obviously all different, but they kind of have to follow a similar logic of how the world works. So to kind of take it in a bit of a different perspective, just for like a fresh look on what those aspects can be, is definitely interesting, especially if you're like a long-term fan of Final Fantasy.
Yeah. So I mean, this is definitely the game of the show for me, I would say. And they're saying on the blog it's just kind of in the polishing section of the of development, and so I would imagine we're probably going to be playing this at some point next year. And so this is mark it down on the release calendar, folks. This is a big one. And I mean, especially coming onto PS5 for the first time. I know Remake was on PS5 as well, and it was beautiful. But I think Final Fantasy, well, the characters in a lot of Final Fantasy games, I feel like they're never quite the same level of like that facial capture like you see in Callisto Protocol and whatnot. But where these games really stand out visually, I think, is like the effects on the moves and some of the different summons. And like I remember there was like those electricity and fire effects going on in the trailer, and those to me are just like standout animations in terms of those kind of effects. And like some of the moves just get so big and ridiculous in Final Fantasy, right? Like I just can't wait to see what that potentially could look like on the PS5.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So yeah, overall good show. I guess you say Final Fantasy is your biggest standout. Callisto would be mine. There's a lot of good stuff in here.
There's a lot of good stuff. And speaking of our favorite announcements, let's get into a few from our listeners as well. They replied to that poll that we put out, but James Holiday replied, one of our people that's always retweeting our stuff. Thank you very much to James. But he was saying, like, he has a lot of stuff he's listed down here: Resident Evil 4 Remake, Callisto Protocol, Final Fantasy. So those are the kind of the ones we're looking at. And he also listed Rollerdrome as one of his most excited. So I'm really interested to see. It's cool to see that game pop on someone's list of like favorite announcements, considering some of the other stuff that was shown. But I mean, that just goes to show maybe he's a big Ollie fan, and that's kind of
maybe he's my arch nemesis, James, and I want you to play Rollerdrome and let me know what you think of it, because I have officially bowed out and I am not allowed to play. But I do have a weird curiosity about like what the heck is this game, and I want to know about it.
Yeah, exactly. But we also had Wolverine Drew wrote in and just said it was an A+ state of play in his opinion, although B- for like a summer showcase. So I guess in terms of like what we usually see from E3 and whatnot, and I can kind of see that opinion, but I agree it was like an A+ state of play. Well, I mean A+, very generous, right? Like what is the highest? S? Like S is high.
Yeah, I think we go up to S.
A+ is good. A+ is good. And Alexander also wrote in and said he had very low expectations, but was pleasantly surprised with the heavy hitters they showed, and that this should be the standard for state of play going forward. And I would like to say that if this happened to be the standard of the kind of show we get going forward, then man, we're in for a lot of big stuff, because there was a lot of like, you know, like you said, heavy hitting games in this trailer. So do I think every state of play going forward will be kind of this quality? Probably not, because this is the June kind of stand-in for E3, right? And but at the same time, like they showed so much, it would be nice to see things be closer to this in the future than they have been in some of the other shows.
Absolutely. And I just want to chime in as well. After Drew gave us a rating, he did elaborate as well and say the things he's most excited, or his favorite announcements were the Resident Evil 4 remake, and then also Stray coming to PS Plus. So again, it's cool, to point out that, you know, we're getting it on release coming to the service, and then also Stray just looks like it might be like a cool weird cat game. And you know what it reminds me of? When I was trying to think of what it is, and it's come to me now. It's that Netflix show Love, Death, and Robots. But there's that one episode that's about, like, the robots get that cat and they think it's gonna kill them and they're like scared of it. Is it just like looks to me like that's a video game now?
Interesting. I've not watched that, but I should go back, because I also saw there was new episodes of Love, Death, and Robots that came out. So that was a good show. I like that one.
Good show. So yeah, that's what it reminds me of, and that might be wrong, but maybe we'll find out next month.
Maybe we will. In any case, guys, if you want to write in and get in touch and let us know what your favorite announcements were, what you're looking forward to from State of Play, or just what you thought of the show in general, we'd love to hear from you. So please write in, like we said at the top of the show, to circlesandsquarespod@gmail.com, or tweet us as well. That's where we get a lot of interaction that we read today. So again, all those links are below. Thank you so much for everyone who's listened and watched along with us. Of course, this is these recaps for State of Plays are some of our favorite shows to do, and especially when it's the big June kind of reveal. So in terms of the other conferences and kind of news that's going to come out over the summer, it seems like we have a lot less conferences so far, at least that have been announced. And I think our plan for next week for the news show is to go over the other announcements that have kind of happened over the time, and we'll just keep going with that, I guess, as the summer progresses, when there's more conferences announced. So keep up to date on that. But I guess that's going to close us out for the show today. So again, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you all next time on the Circles and Squares podcast experience. Bye.